Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassie, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace and harmony, coherence, to help make a better world. And this is going to be a real special conversation for me because our guest and I had an amazing introduction and experience in India just a couple weeks ago. I'm proud to introduce my friend, fabulous musician, traveler through India and all over the world from England, Dave Balen. Dave, thank you so much for being here with me. It's great to see you and be with you.
Thanks, Chief Dude, and your wonderful introduction has made me feel very humble and a bit of an imposter, but it's very kind of you to say those.
Well, you know, if I call myself the Chief Spiritual Dude, so that, you know, somebody did give me that name, though. I didn't decide that for myself. They gave me that name, and I said, okay, you know what, I'm rolling with that thing. I can do that. So just to jump right into that, I was in India. We had gone to Varanasi. I was there with Raj Saganaka and his father Pramod Kumar from the Devi Music Ashram. I'd wanted to go to Varanasi, and they agreed to go with me. And we ate practically all our meals at this hotel restaurant because it was pretty good, and it was up high and everything. And one night there was only one other person in the restaurant, and I think we kind of waved or something. And then Raj said, "Oh, so where are you from? Where are you going?" And that just opened up almost sort of the floodgates of synchronicity. And we had a conversation. It turned out you're a musician. You've been going to Varanasi in India for years and decades. And when he said, "Oh, where are you going next?" And you said, "Well, going to Rishikesh. I'm staying at the Devi Music Ashram." And we all went, "Oh my God." So we ended up spending a bunch of time. You were so kind to record some of my songs with me in Raj's studio, and it was just such wonderful synchronicity and great to meet you and so much fun. So thanks for that. We were just rolling in it, weren't we? That was a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When we're in our flow, these things happen, don't they? And they seem to happen a lot when we're on the road away from our usual what can I say, earthly responsibilities, which we all have, and they're all right and part of our lives. But it's good when you can get away and be another version of yourself, and that allows those things to happen more often, I find. Like I had quite a lot of inverted commas coincidences and things that happened that led me into certain scenes or experiences that otherwise I probably wouldn't have had. But you have to be open to it as well and go with that flow and not allow the doubting mind to sort of put blockages in the way. It's such a lovely thing, isn't it, when those things happen? So
and I find the more you realize it and recognize it, that those things happen, the more they do happen. Any little thing can just trigger an amazing moment in time in so many different ways.
And they're so memorable, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, when there's a real something going on, because it feels like there's a real resonance that isn't just something superficial, but something that chimes deep within. Sorry if I'm sounding a bit mystical and airy-fairy, but
that's what we do.
That's kind of what it is for me anyway, and clearly what it is for you too, and countless others. I think, what was it? Lennon said, "You can call me a dreamer." Was it in Imagine, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know where that idea came from.
I'm not the only one.
Actually, I did think of Lennon when I was in Rishikesh, because as you know, I went to what they call the Beatles ashram, which was really the Maharishi's ashram, and for me it was a bit of a sentimental journey because, as you said, I was very young, inexperienced, probably not a very nice personality, trying to find himself. And I found myself in India, really. And we were there at exactly the same time the Beatles were there, except that I was probably doing chemical substances and drugs, and I thought I was having a good time. I realised actually I wasn't having a good time. I was lucky to stay alive, really, after all those experiences we
Oh
had.
my gosh.
But I mean, but they were up in Rishikesh meditating, you know, and that's something I got to when I got back. When I was what was that? 1968 we came back, so we went out there in '67. So we're about nearly a year on the road. And in those days, obviously, you probably realise, no internet, no phones, hardly any airlines. Post restaurant was how you communicated with your loved ones. So for my parents, I just left grammar school, didn't do university, and I was going on this holiday, and like every time I wrote to them, it was from further and further away. God, I put my parents through a lot in my ears, as I'm sure many of your viewers will probably resonate with that. But that's something I had to do, and it was life transformative. And you know, I found health and well-being solutions. I found another way of looking at life, which was about the whole, if you like, spiritual, in other words, non-five senses dimensions. And I've been exploring the worlds of healing, spirituality, health and well-being ever since, really. So, and I taught yoga for 7 years as well, soon after I got back from India. So all of these things, you know, India has had such a profound and long-lasting beneficial influence and resonance in my life, you know. And yet I've lived fully the life of a Westerner and run a business with 70 staff and played music with all sorts of people from all cultures, all types of music, from God knows what, classical to klezmer to mainly jazz and improvised music, world music, you name it. You know, I've explored it and played with people, famous and not so
Yeah.
famous, whatever fame means. But
Well, the
but for
Indian.
me, it's about the healing intent behind what you do, rather than, you know, if you like, the ego thing of being fantastic technically and blowing people's minds with what you do or don't do. There's something deeper behind music for me, which has been my main passion and my main driver in life. And now I'm retired from the world of, if you like, family and business. I'm just going back to what I started out doing, because I was professional in the late 60s, early 70s, and then I left that to try and earn enough money to pay a mortgage and bring up a family. And but I've always kept music going, semi-pro, and I've always been involved in stuff. And here I am going back into it at 77. It's a bit of a it's a bit of a turning, a full circle, really. But it's
Yeah.
interesting how lives work out for people, and
Um,
you hear so many stories of people and the things they've gone through and the things that have transformed their lives for ill or for better. And you know, it's fascinating to hear people's stories. You know, it really, really is, and it's all part of the rich tapestry of the best of humanity. And
yeah.
let's face it, that's what we try and do in music, is to sort of try and channel something that's greater than ourselves and allow that, if you like, that influence which brings people up rather than brings them down, can manifest. And that's certainly the intent anyway. Whether we're successful or not, that's for others to judge. But
Yeah. Yeah. No wrong notes. Um, so yeah, we certainly. I mean, Rishikesh and Maharishi's ashram and all that is very kind of a profound thing for me too. That's how I ended up in India. But let's just kind of go back to the beginning. I always like to ask, and then maybe you can talk about the trajectory of how you did end up in India and did some of these other things you mentioned. Like, when do you remember when music came to you? I mean, were your parents musical? Did you have music in the house? Did you take lessons? Were you like 2 or 5 or
man,
15
that's a
or
lot of questions. I'll do my
yeah,
best to
yeah,
answer the cluster question as best I can. My journey started with the fact that my dad was a professional musician. He played the violin. He studied properly, classically. And then in the 20s, jazz was starting. So people like Joe Venuti in the States and Staff Smith were jazz violinists. So Dad loved those. And I grew up with those 78 records. You may remember the 78
Yeah, I
records.
do. I do.
It's sort of, it's a bit like prehistoric animals. They sort of have their own fatal attractions somehow, particularly if you sit on them or take the record out the wrong way up and it ends up on the floor in pieces. But I mean, so I grew up listening to that stuff, and he had classical, he had stuff, and of course he practiced as well. And it was lovely to hear him. He didn't go into classical. He was more in the, he would play in gypsy bands and play in all sorts of sessions and with all sorts of people. And so that was there. And the thing was, he did not want me to be a musician. And that was the one thing in my teens I wanted to be. So we had all sorts of clashes and crashes, as you will imagine. And I said, that's all I want to do. And I won't go into our family history, but it was a bit at times quite tempestuous. Anyway, needless to say, I was completely set on doing this. And because he wouldn't put me on music lessons, because he wanted me to be in business and be able to earn a regular income, because it's quite difficult, particularly after the Second World War. It's very difficult for musicians to get work. And he ended up sort of building a business during the day, and then at night he'd go out and play music, and so he was happy to shut his violin case permanently and just do business. But for me, it was always more than a job, and for me, it was always something I couldn't explain, very powerful, and still is. And so I learned the easiest thing I could find, which was banging things and scraping things and rattling things. And I would just improvise from the kitchen and play along with stuff that was on the telly. And obviously,
when you were like 10, maybe, or 5, or
yeah, sort of between I don't know, 11 and 13 probably.
Yeah.
And self-taught at that point. And my dad said to me when I was absolutely adamant, he said, well, if you are going to do it, at least bloody we'll do it properly and learn properly how to do it. And of course, I didn't. I've learned over the years, by self-learning and having teachers and mentors. But and the other problem for me was I just loved all of it. So it was like I wanted to play the saxophone, the keyboard, sing, write things. And I do all those things to a lesser extent, but my main thing is percussion, rhythm, and drum kit. Well, anyway, I came back from India. I met a guy in Afghanistan, and we did some.
Well, how did you end up in India though? When you're banging on things when you're 11 or 13, and then so you were in bands in your teens, and then you thought, I'll go to India because why?
No, I'll tell you that the thing was I ran away from home basically, and I met a guy in Paris who had gone there, and it was at the time of the 66, wasn't it? There was a lot of beatniks and bohemians, and there were lots of jazz clubs in Paris at the time, and it was very it was a very powerful, creative zeitgeist at the time. And cut a very long story short, I wandered around looking for a jazz club. I met this guy in the street asking him the way in my broken schoolboy French. He didn't know what I was talking about, but he said, well, come this way. And anyway, that was Armand. I'm still friends with Armand to this day. And basically, we went around Europe together in his tent, and we hitchhiked around Europe, and then we came back. And then we were both into the Beatles. We were both into music. He wanted to learn the sitar. I wanted to learn the drums and figure out how these weird sounding drums that I'd first heard in the early 60s, borrowing records out the local music library. I thought, how the hell do they make these sounds? And even when I bought one, I couldn't figure it out, So anyway, we went overland together. That was our plan. And we ended up in Benares. He learned at the Benares Hindu University for about 3 or 4 months. I, in true fashion, tried one class and decided this felt too much like the grammar school I'd run away from. So I just asked the students and learned by picking it up, and watched some amazing concerts with some truly great players who sadly are no longer with us. But the inspiration has resonated down through the years, and I've been very fortunate to have some amazing teachers, and people that I've learned from and been around. So it carries on. I'm still a beginner as far as I'm concerned after 60 odd years.
Yeah. So you actually went overland
Yeah,
from all the
yeah,
way by bus mainly, or
I
train?
wish. I wish. No. We started hitching along the south of France. We hitched our way through, I don't know whether it's Czechoslovakia now or not. And we had loads of adventures along the way, as you do, and kindnesses as well. And also we had a few life-threatening events. The chief of police who picked us up once in a Slovenian country worried us slightly because he was driving very fast on the wrong side of the road, and his breath smelt of schnapps, which he offered us while we were driving along. And when his glove compartment is full of parking tickets. And we met all sorts of people, and it was great and very memorable. But when we got to Bulgaria, it was still communist, and the border guards got on the train and threatened to throw everyone off if we didn't cut our hair, because there were loads of long hairs on the train making our way east.
Jeez.
So we decided we'd buy a ticket, and we got to Istanbul, and then we hung out there for a week, and then we found an Italian guy with a car who wanted to drive across to India. So I co-drove.
Wow.
Well, some of the way. Part of the problem was I'd only just passed my test and never driven really, and I nearly drove the car off a cliff. So I wasn't given too many of the driving duties after that. But it was Afghanistan where we ended up, and we were there for a good 6 weeks.
Wow.
In the time of the Shah, before all the Islamist stuff had taken hold, and it was quite clear that the Russians were trying to influence things, and the Chinese, and they were all building roads and giving them goods so they could sell these goods in their shops and things like that. And it was stepping big style back in time. And I loved Afghanistan for it. It was very full of very proud tribesmen who wouldn't look you in the eye. They would just stride past you. And eventually we got on the back of a lorry and got into Delhi. So it was kind of, no, I wish it was one bus or one train that got us all the way there, but it was bits and pieces.
Did you play music in Afghanistan too?
I did. I played with this guy, Roger Bunn, who was a UK musician, and we did a bit of busking as well as lots of jamming. The people from all over the world passing through or coming back, or there were people from the Vietnam War who were either escaping from it or deserted from it or whatever, who'd ended up in India. So it was a real melting pot of people you'd meet on the road, and it was very, very inspiring. And you had to grow up quickly, when you're on the road, because you're only looking after yourself. You haven't got mummy and daddy and or the family support or the financial support, indeed. And so it made me quite tough and resilient,
So, but you ended up you said Benares, but that's the same as Varanasi, and the earlier name is Kashi?
Well, they call it Kashi still. A lot of the people call it that because that's the ancient name of the city. It's the city of Shiva, effectively. So it carries that very strong energy. And, I think Benares was more under the colonial period. So I think there's this move to kind of eradicate or lessen the effects of colonialism, in inverted commas, in India. So they've changed a lot of names, like Madras became Chennai, and I think Bangalore became Bengaluru, and Benares became Varanasi. But they can't erase it because even one of the railway stations is still called Benares Railway Station, even though the other one's Varanasi.
Yeah. Well, I had been, people had suggested I go, and I wanted to go, and that's how we ended up meeting. But it is such an ancient city and so full of people and so complex. But we were there for Holi, We were there for the eclipse. I saw that one night when we were at the Arti along the banks of the Ganga, and it's such an amazing place because of the, I guess that, I don't know, tradition or knowledge or belief that if you're Hindu, if you go there to die, or maybe if you die there or are cremated there, then you'll go to heaven. So they have that kind of thing going on right on the banks of the Ganga, and it's just so fascinating. So, but you've been going back to there and studying tabla and other music for this whole time. That's been
No.
50 years.
I wish. No. What's happened is it was about 40 years before I felt I was ready to go back, and even then I did it more as a tourist. But then last year Armand was ready, and he hadn't been ready either. And for him, he'd been so locked in that period that hardly a day went by when he wasn't thinking about being in Benares. It's been very powerful for him too. And he's only recently felt that he's able to go back. So we both agreed we'd go back. So this is the two adventurers from the 60s going back together last year. We found a place which we rented, we found teachers, and we've been working with them ever since online. And we just felt, well, now that we're retired, we'll do this every year. So we have been coming. Well, I came back this year. Armand unfortunately had to have a knee operation, and he hasn't felt well enough this year. But it'll be a regular thing, and the online lessons are carrying on as well. So, yeah. The thing is, you never stop learning. So even though I wasn't doing India, I was learning jazz more. I was learning more about harmony. I was learning more about different world religions and different world musics and cultures. And so I've just been enriching my experience and my interfacing with all these different musics. And you saw my studio earlier.
Yeah. Oh my
It's
God.
it's full of instruments
Impressive.
from all around the world that I've been collecting for the last 60 odd years. So and I'm actually I've been composing songs as well for about 25 years, and I'm doing nearly finished a CD of all my songs as well. So there's lots of other stuff been going musically in those intervening 40 or so years when I haven't been to India.
Okay.
So
But you were playing with bands, and you've been recording and doing a lot of different things all these years, in addition to having a job, as your father wanted you to do.
I managed to do both. Isn't that neat?
Yeah. So then, what have you really seen, or what is it that is powerful about music? What drives you? What have you seen that it kind of indicates what that power is? And that power may not even be the right term. And is it something that, it's been a lifelong thing for you, but does India have a special role in that? Maybe kind of that seminal point?
It does in a way, in the sense that because I never did any formal training, I picked up learning to play jazz from listening to records and playing along on all the rest of it. There were no tutors and certainly no courses in those days.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing was, with India, I started to learn something. I started to learn a system and a way of playing and a language. And it was only later on I started to properly learn Western. I mean, you learn stuff at school, but, without no disrespect to the teaching profession, but the teaching style didn't work for me in those days. Mm-hmm. And so it was only later I started to do workshops and learn things and read books and practice the clarinet more and the saxophone and, learn to read and all that kind of stuff. So, I think it's something about the individual journey everyone takes, and everyone is unique in so many ways. And I don't think it was just my father, or the fact that even my grandfather in Russia, he was a musician as well. I learned from my grandma. There is that influence. One of my sons is a drummer, but you know, it's more than that. For me, music is more than that. It's about energy. It's about intent. It's about healing. You know, this earth, I always believed, is a planet of healing and music. And people come here, if you like. My philosophy is people have more than one life. I respect other people don't believe that, but that's always been my reality. And that, you know, souls are attracted here to have that experience of music and healing and becoming whole and developing their potential more in ways that maybe they wouldn't learn in other experiences. And so for me, the music has a profound importance to humanity. And if you think about how music can and does bring people together, as well as it can bring them together for negative reasons, and we've all seen that through history, it more powerfully, I think, brings it together for positive reasons. And people get so much from it, whether it's on a small scale or on big festivals or worldwide through streaming or whatever other, you know, ways people connect with it. And I've always loved the concept that you get in that book. Was it The Music Lesson? Or was it the one after that, where he talks about, you know,
Victor Wooten.
You don't make music, you somehow make a channel for the music that's already there to flow through. And you could say that's true about spirituality and the soul, you know, that unless you create the conditions in your personality for the soul to actually manifest itself through you, it doesn't happen. It happens in a very oblique, behind the scenes way. Very often you're not aware of it. When you start to be open to it in the same way that you're open to music, then things can flow, things can happen, you can grow, your humility can grow. You realize you're not the most important person in the universe, and you become part of something that's bigger than yourself. And when you're in a band, that's true. I mean, I've been in so many bands and groups over the years, and I'm sure others in the same position as me will say, yeah, you feel that you're part of something bigger than you. So if you think about the Beatles as an obvious example, now individually, yes, they're great, but collectively they made something that was so much more than the individual collective parts. And I think that's a very easy example to cite, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what you've said is really profound. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, music is one thing, but it's really just kind of like part of living and having source or energy or God or whatever kind of come through you. The example of the Beatles, boy, that was such a synchronicity to me. When I think of being in Rishikesh now and kind of having some idea what it was like, however many years ago that was, and you were there in Varanasi and knew what it was. I mean, you know, you just had
There was a zeitgeist at the time, to use that phrase. I don't know why I use it, but it's something about the feeling of the time that, again, was bigger than any one individual. We all felt it. People called, in the UK, we had the Summer of Love. Well, typically I was on the road to India, so I missed out on the Summer of Love. but I mean, you know, we learned and resonated with what was going on the West Coast and other places in America, you know, and other countries throughout the world. Felt something was shifting, and somehow we have to keep that, if you like, that idealism and that positivity and that trust that somehow it's all for a reason, and that somehow everything happens for a reason. And it's what you make of it and where you go with it and where it takes you, so that you can move from maybe being a victim to being in touch with the pain and the difficulty and whatever it is that you're going through. And music can be a real help. You think about people that have gone through life crisis or midlife crisis and what have you, or breakups. And very often they'll talk about a certain tune or a certain melody or a certain piece of music that has been really formative in helping them cope and ultimately heal. And wow, you know, maybe people will say, well, a piece of poetry or a piece of literature or something. There's something about a piece of music.
Yeah, and just in line with what we were talking about, once you're open to that and see the benefit it can be, you know, I think you could just sort of open yourself to music as helping your life through whatever you want, and I think it'll do that. But I was taken by Maharishi's ashram, that beautiful site over the Ganga, looking over Rishikesh, and that the Beatles, this unbelievably successful band in 1968, ended up there in a little Rishikesh. I mean, it's not easy to get there now.
No.
I mean, how did they get there then? But it kind of brought Indian music, the sitar, Ravi Shankar and George Harrison. There was so much that came out of that was so good for us all. And I don't know, when we're there, when I'm there in India, and you know, certainly the things that we were able to do together to play some of those songs and record them, and to meet people that we met. I mean, it's all there for the taking in a way. It's just
It's interesting you
amazing.
say that. I mean, and I think a generation of probably, you know, younger people won't know about all of this and how in many ways formative it was. It's interesting. I played some tabla at the ashram with a lovely lady who just started learning the sitar, and she knew nothing about the Beatles' involvement with it. So I sent her loads of stuff like Norwegian Wood and Within You and Without You and all of that. But actually, Jefferson, it goes back even further in the UK, because in the 1950s, and this was post-Indian independence, there was a very famous concert violinist called Yehudi Menuhin, world famous, and he got into yoga, meditation, and Indian music. And he actually introduced it to the West in the 1950s, and he made a couple of albums with, was it Ali Akbar, and also some South Indian musicians, and brought, you know, and introduced Ravi Shankar and all the rest of it. So there was this thin thread, but it was very much a specialist. You had to look for it to find it. And anyway, people thought you were a crackpot or a bit weird to get interested in all that snake charmer stuff. but actually, the Beatles helped normalize it and popularize it in a way that was quite special. And of course, Ravi G coming across with Alaraka, who was his drummer at the time for touring, was very powerful, particularly, you know, I know in America, and I saw concerts, you know, that came into the UK, and they started to get bigger and bigger at bigger halls. And I was privileged to sit in some tabla classes with Alaraka when he came to the UK in the 1980s, which was a big privilege for me. And I played with, you know, South Indian dancers and various other people in concerts. So I've been very privileged to have just little glimpses and attempts at playing with these terrific people.
Yeah,
it's been a real privilege.
And you know, I also like to ask, well, how can we tap into music to help make a better world? And you just basically answered the questions.
So that's good.
You just, I mean, but I want to hear what you have to say. But you know, it kind of happens if you're open to it. I think even if society was more open to it, people now kind of, I mean, music is, as Victor talks about in his book, has become more of a commodity, and he says the spirit of music could be dying and all that. But I think if we're open to it, and you and I and enough other people are doing that we can bring some healing, as you might say.
Well, here's the thing. I think and yeah, I mean, I do get what Victor says, and aspects of that I think is true. But if you look back in time, popular music has always been commoditized. Let's face it. So, but I think it's so much more widely spread now than it ever was, this commoditization, and the developing of the personality cult and the ego and the cash cows and the merch, merchandise, all that. But I don't know, you know, look, very great Indian saint who's had a very subtle and at times powerful effect on my life is Ramana Maharshi. And he was a saint who lived in Tiruvannamalai most of his life in South India. His reach was worldwide, and I read stuff about him when I came back from India, weirdly, not while I was there. But he talks about the silence And there is something about how you can still your mind. It doesn't have to be in meditation. It can be just in your daily life. But try not to allow your mind to start chattering away during the day and making judgments and opinions and this and that. Because when you allow that to really quieten down, and it does take quite a lot of taming of the tiger, but if you can do that, then you start to create conditions whereby you can be more receptive to the subtle effects of music and its healing. And it goes beyond the razzmatazz and the ego noise into a much deeper place. And so, you know, there's something about how we listen, not just to people playing music, but when we're playing music, listening to the other. That's one of the things I love in jazz and improvised music, is you have to, well, in my book anyway, and in others' book, you have to listen, you have to interact, you have to allow your ego not to keep talking and butting in and chatting, because it's something, again, it's something about the music rather than about you. And so for me, there's a lot of parallels between the spiritual path and the musical path. In fact, for me, they are the same. Really.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. I mean, I certainly opened up to spirit of music, and it's shown me so many things. I've learned so many things through this music path. And that's not being a professional, that's not doing it my whole life, but even just, it's been like crammed into the last part of my life. And
man, it's just not about being professional. If you can get those experiences when you're professional, it's a gift from the gods. And many people have been privileged to have that experience. But if you, and it's not about the earning of the money, it's about, can you have those experiences with one or two people when you're jamming, when you go to a concert, whatever, when you record something, because very often recording can take the juice away. So how you orient yourself inside before you play, for me, is crucial. Is the dedication, is the invocation of something deeper than yourself. Whenever you play, or whenever I practice, I try and do that in my own small, humble way. You know, it's.
Well, I agree 100%, and maybe just to wrap it up a little bit here, but I had been thinking of taking advantage of Raj's studio and record some songs, and I wanted to be able to play, have a tabla player or a percussionist. And then there you were, and we kind of said, let's try these songs, and it seemed to work. And I thought that, you know, it was really fun, and it was really, I was very grateful for you and for Raj and for just being able to do that, and not to sell any music, to just put some songs out there with our intention. And I guess even having this conversation, that's sort of what we're doing now too, you know, with our best intention.
And the other thing I'd just like to say is, music isn't always about the sound that you can hear. It's also about the silence and the spaces that you leave.
I flipped off the mute button because my bird clock went off. It's 1 o'clock here, and I don't know if you could hear it or not, but
that's very funny, because what I just said, I don't know if you caught that, was that it's not just about the sounds that you make, but it's the silences and the spaces that you leave.
It's so important. I mean, I'm still kind of getting my head around the importance of silence. I mean, there's and rests and everything else, but. Well, it's been great talking with you. Thanks for taking the time to chat a little bit about your experiences and your perspectives. I really, appreciate you and value what we had there during that time, and looking forward to the next time, and, in between times as well. So, yeah, Dave Balen, and I should have mentioned, I mean, through most of this, we've been able to see your Winged Heart Records, your studio logo there. It's very cool in your amazing studio. So, more of that to come. So thanks.
Well, thank you
very much, Dave.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Oh, great, Chief Dude, and thank you for the privilege of having me on and listening to the old Gits mini story.
Yeah, well, we're always contributing and making a difference. That's what I like to believe. All right. Thank you, Dave Balen. Thanks so much,
Keep
everybody.
flying the flag.